And we are live. We all know what it is, man. It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman. And right now, I'm telling y'all, man. So let me peep you on this, right? When I was in college, I received an award called the Black History in the Making Award. You know, why? I really have no idea. You know, I wasn't really doing a whole lot then. You know what I'm saying? But maybe somebody saw something that I couldn't see at the time. I'm trying to tell you right now. You know what I'm saying? I've got a guy who actually would probably aptly deserve that award. My man, Justin Giboney, is in the building. We have a modern day, we got a living legend right here. You're like the Ric Flair of urban politics, bro. How you feeling, man? You doing all right?
I'm good, man. You're too kind, but I do like that hometown hero, man. That's tough. I like that.
Yeah, man. You know, so actually a lot of people ask me, why I refer to myself as that. And really it's the idea behind this whole platform is that we're all hometown heroes. You know, it's this notion that basically you don't have to have a huge platform. You don't have to have 5 PhDs and 3 other degrees behind your name in order to really make an impact. So the idea is that we're all hometown heroes. You know what I'm saying? Like you can be in your local context making a difference. And so that's kind of where I refer to myself as hometown hero. And the idea is I'm trying to produce other hometown heroes. That's kind of like the idea behind that, man. So
I like it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So Justin Giboney, man, tell us about, who you are, man. Let our audience know who you are and, what you do, man. Tell us about the AND campaign and all that.
Yeah, well, I'm a Christian. I'm also an attorney, political strategist, and I'm the president and co-founder of the AND campaign. And the AND campaign is a Christian civic organization that's really trying to assert the compassion and the conviction of Christ in the public square. We're trying to get Christians really to see politics differently, to kind of bring about a new paradigm for Christians in politics, where it's not as much based on your party, because a lot of us have gotten to a place where our party and our ideological tribe kind of make the decisions and we go along with it as long as they get us to hate the other side enough. But we're saying, nah, man, it's bigger than that, that we have to allow our Christianity and our biblical principles be the guide, and however we can use parties and ideologies to do that work is cool, but they're actually the tools and not the masters of the conversation.
So, oh man, see, all right, now you have to understand, I've got like slightly, I think I got a touch of ADD, man, because like you can say something and then that gets my mind going in a whole different direction. So like already, I feel like you've set the stage for a lot of different discussion, but let me just, kind of, dig a little bit on something that you just said. So you talked about how, say these other, I don't know, ideologies, political factions, however you want to put it, are leading the conversation. Like what do you mean by that? Like what are, maybe to put it differently, what are Christians, what should our rightful place be in the public square? Like where are we getting that wrong, you think?
Yeah, so I'll take the first part of that question and just say what's happening right now. So I'll talk about what's happening right now and what I think it should look like. What's happening right now is there are 2 groups in American politics that kind of run everything. It's the devoted conservatives, which I think are about 6% of the population, and then it's the progressive activists, which are about, I think, 8% of the population. And these are the folks on the 2 ends of the political spectrum. They're extreme and they share some interesting things in common. They're affluent and they're white, but they really set the framework for our public discourse, right? So what's happening is Christians are getting, because they have the most money, they have the most organization, even though they're small groups, we kind of take their narratives and we take their frameworks and we apply them to politics. What I'm saying to do is say, hey, I don't really care what those 2 groups are saying right now when it comes to me forming what politics should look like for me as a Christian. And so the AND campaign is saying, throw out those frameworks, because if you frame a question the wrong way, you could actually end up with 2 wrong answers, right? Yeah. So we're saying, let's frame these issues for ourselves and have Christians take a leadership role, raise civic literacy among Christians, and know how to apply our values. But you can't apply your values properly if you have a bad framework. So Christians should be applying their own framework, and where we can work with others and and find co-belligerents. That's great. I'm not against that, but we have to find the issues for ourselves, and that's just not happening. So right. Whether it's a race conversation or a whole bunch of other conversations, we're taking somebody else's narrative, somebody else's frameworks, and applying those when those frameworks are made by human hands, we have something much better, but we're surrendering our public witness to other people.
So I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, man. I know we're going to dig into that a little bit later, but I had to at least ask that question to kind of get your thoughts on it. But we're going to come back to that. I got some thoughts on, at least in terms of why I think that might be happening. I think there's a couple of different reasons. We'll get back to that. But before we do, though, so you're engaged in the public square. You're encouraging Christians to do the same. For you, though, like how did you get into this space? You know what I'm saying, of getting into the public from the biblical perspective, trying to make an impact? Like when did the light bulb kind of come on for you that's something that you were called to do?
Yeah, so I was I was working as an attorney, but on the side I was also doing like political campaigns and all that stuff. And it just hit me one day. I was like, man, why is it that the folks who I'm running their campaign, and even some of my friends who are Christian, when they get into the public square, when they want to run for something, they feel like they got to go all the way to the left, right? They feel like it's a given that they're going to have to surrender some of their biblical convictions, whether it be about the sanctity of life, whether it be about the Christian sexual ethic. It's a given in a lot of progressive places. Because I'm in Atlanta, right? It's a given that you're just going to have to say, man, I'm not going to be able to take that with me. And that just didn't sit right. That just didn't sit right with me. I saw more and more folks who were in the church and all that felt that way. But then when I went to church, when I was, with in the circles that I was running in, there were a lot of biblical Christians. So it's like, if we got the numbers, how is it that we feel like we need to run as, like a midtown progressive if we come from a different foundation? And I just began to realize that it was actually the fact that the secular progressives, especially in the secular space, in the urban space, controlled the reward and punishment mechanism when it came to politics. So they rewarded the people who did what they wanted, and they punished the people who didn't do what they wanted. And that the church and folks of faith just lacked organization in that space. Like we just weren't deliberate about making sure that our values shone through, because, and understandably, we were kind of worried about what might come from the right. So that's the first thing that hit me. But then some of my friends who were in the suburbs or in, other areas who were Republicans were kind of like, I don't feel like I can be as compassionate as I need to be. And that's kind of where I started to see the dynamic, started getting into the word and thinking about this through the word. And it hit me. I said, here's the issue. The issue was there was this false dichotomy, and we may get into that later. I don't want to dig too deep into it, but it was just the discomfort of seeing folks feel like they couldn't walk into the public square with a biblical framework and with that biblical foundation, that they had to kind of outsource their public witness to progressives or to, ideological conservatives.
Got you. It makes a lot of sense, man. It makes a lot of sense. And I feel that. So it's funny because as you were talking about it, I was thinking about this documentary that I was watching. Actually, it's been a couple months ago now. I think right before like the Rona hit and all that. I think it was on Amazon Prime about the prohibition movement. I guess it's been back in 1800s. Early 1900s. Whenever it was. That kind of led to them abolishing the sale of alcohol and all that kind of stuff. And what I found was interesting is that you have this contingent of people who were able to bring their convictions against alcohol and actually get laws passed, with, to at least, to some extent support on both sides of the aisle at that time. And one of the things that they were talking about is that these anti-alcohol prohibitionists or whatever, their perspective was, we don't care what your platform is or what your political persuasion is. This is our agenda. This is what we're about. And whoever is riding with it, we're riding with you. If you're not, then we're riding with somebody else. And that's kind of how they carried it. And they, amassed such a movement that them as a contingent, had this power to sway an election. And that's how they were able to get certain legislation passed, because, they were like, look, we're not here to take sides. You know what I'm saying? Our interest is this, and this is what we're going to do. This is what we're about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that other communities have more so than Christian communities for sure. You know what I'm saying? And actually, I'll just be explicit. Like, for example, the LGBT community. You know what I'm saying? If you're about passing, pro-LGBT legislation, then they're gonna rock with you. You know what I'm saying? And they're gonna make sure that enough people rock with you that they're able to get some things done. Interestingly enough, when I was in grad school, went to grad school to be a social worker, and we actually had a representative from the local LGBT legislative, whatever, some sort of advocacy group. And she was saying, this is back in like 2004, 2005, something like that, and she was saying like, look, we have people at the local level, or whether it be your city, your school board, you're telling me your city level positions and so forth, all those levels of government, we have positioned people who are for our cause. So within about next 10 or so years, these people will have moved up the ranks and will be able to do A, B, and C in order to influence legislation the way we wanted to. And at the time, honestly, I just kind of was in a different space. I wasn't really paying attention. I thought it was interesting. I was like, yeah, maybe not. But now looking over the last, say 8 to 10 years, it's like, oh snap, like they was not playing. You know what I'm saying? Like they have been very strategic about advancing themselves in the public square. And I think that's something, in terms of what you're hitting on, that's something that we don't do. You know what I'm saying? We don't have that solidarity, and we're allowing other people to really outpace us. You know what I'm saying? In that regard. So, I mean, I think it's just dope what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? It's dope.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. That movement has been brilliant and very shrewd. I think we miss that sometimes. Politics is chess. And I think sometimes Christians, we play it as a game of emotional tic-tac-toe, right? And so instead of saying, hey, man, we may have a past, I might not even like you, I'm going to work with you to get something done. We say, man, I don't like you. You don't like me. You said something that hurt my feelings, so I'm not going to do it. I'm not working with you. Right. It's just unfortunate because it shows a lack of kind of emotional maturity. Right. We need to be more kind of disciplined and shrewd as we go into that space, but not lacking compassion or lacking integrity. Right. And I think you can do all those things. So yeah, we can step it up. I mean, there are certainly some really good examples. I'm not going to sit here and say it's all bad, but in general, if you want to come into politics and just kind of be emotional and think that what you see is what you get, that there's not a whole lot of stuff going on beneath the surface, then you're going to miss a lot, and you're just not going to be effective in that space, for better or worse. And I think we could do better with that. That's a fact. That's a fact, man. I mean, and it's not just in the political realm either. I don't want to make this all about the LGBT, but I mean, even, media, watching, television, movies and so forth. Like, you can't watch a show now without there being some, lesbian or homosexual character, whatever. And you would think, based upon the media, that population is represented much more broadly in society than they actually are, than the numbers actually show. But it's because, when you put your dollars behind, getting yourself in those spaces and that sort of exposure, it pays off. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so there's all different ways to play the game. And like you said, it's not even just checkers. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're playing chess here, but we're not even playing checkers. We're playing like tic-tac-toe or something like that. You know what I mean? And we really have to step up, I think, our political IQ, if you will. You know what I'm saying, if we're really gonna, get in the game and do what needs to be done. So let me throw this at you. Now, this is something that I was in an interview. It's been probably a couple of months ago now, maybe 1 or 2, and it's specific to the Black community, right? Specific to the Black community. One thing I was saying was that I think that the Black community specifically, talking about in terms of knowing how to play the game. Yeah, I feel like we've been, and this I would say, just like I said it then, I think we've been running victory laps since 1960, the 1960s, since the Civil Rights Act, right? It's like we misinterpreted what it was that the civil rights movement achieved, in the sense that the civil rights movement gave us access politically and in some ways economically that we didn't have previously. You know what I'm saying? Like, we had access, whether it be in terms of voting rights and being able to, maneuver or whatever from a political standpoint. But to me, I liken that as like being, giving somebody the keys to a car. You know what I'm saying? If you don't know how to drive that car, then you're either going to wreck yourself or you're just not going to go anywhere. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that what should have happened was, what we needed was following the civil rights movement. What we needed was a follow-up political and economic movement where we really obtained some mastery over those realms of maneuvering in society, such that, we could then take advantage of, you know what I'm saying, or capitalize on the rights and access that was secured through the civil rights movement. You know what I'm saying? But
I feel like we've been like running victory laps, you know what I'm saying, ever since the civil rights movement. And we, cheer for Martin Luther King and all respect to him or whatever. But it's like, fam, like, what have we done since then? Now, mind you, I'm not saying that, that everything in terms of where we are now is all on our shoulders. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, like, have we availed ourselves to the best of, what we have access to that was secure for us by, previous generations? And so I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. Like, from your perspective, does that sound crazy? Am I way off? And feel free to tell me if I am, but, like what are your views on that?
No, I hear where you're coming from. I think one of the things to keep it. So to say this, there are several things that could have been done better, right? There are ways that we could have took advantage of the opportunities that we had that we might not have. That said, it's not easy. And so, when you're lacking resources and you have just all these historical attempts to hold you down and not to allow you to get where you want to be, we have to factor that conversation in there too.
Sure.
But truly, we can do better. And I think today we need to look at that history and look at how it can be overstated, sometimes what was accomplished and, how we moved forward and what can we do better? I mean, at times we had allies that just had a different agenda. And we didn't necessarily realize that was a completely different agenda that wasn't leading us necessarily to a better place, but leading them somewhere that they wanted to go. So sure, I mean, I think, again, things could have been done better. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's no excuse because people are hurting and we have to take advantage of the opportunities in front of us.
Absolutely. So now with that being said, I can segue into this book that you just dropped, July 21st, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, I told you before we hopped on, man, I got my copy. It's in the mail, you know what I'm saying? Now, I know Amazon, they've been pretty tight with it actually. So I should be able to get it either today or tomorrow. So I'm definitely excited about that. Shout out to Rocket Rennie. That's a new viewer, I think. You know what I'm saying? Appreciate the super chat. So, by the way, so at the end, we will be doing a short Q&A. Y'all know how we do around here. Super chats, we kind of give them, the first dibs, and then we kind of go from there. So if one of the mods can take note of that question, because it may scroll up, I might miss it, so that we can make sure we get to that question later on. But, thank you for the super chat, Rocket Rennie. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so in regard to your new book, man, tell us about it. Give us kind of like a summary statement, if you will, in terms of what the book is about and some of the high points that you cover.
Yeah, so the book is called Compassion and Conviction. It's the AND campaign's guide to faithful civic engagement. And really what we're trying to do is lay out a framework for Christians to better engage politics. And so we start really with the question, should Christians engage politics? And we answer that question to the affirmative. All of this is biblically based. So when you read this book, you're going to see scripture and scripture and scripture, because it's not about what I think. It's not about what I think is best. I think it had to be really rooted in the gospel, rooted in what the Bible says about these things. And we did that. And so we go from should Christians being engaged to what's the real relationship between church and state? Because I hear so many people. I was at a church one time where I kind of gave the introduction. A sister came up to me and said, well, we shouldn't be talking about, Christian values in politics because it's a separation between church and state. That's not what that means. And so we really explain what that means. We talk about partisanship and partnerships, but I think the core of what we're trying to do is create a framework, a biblical framework for engaging politics. And what that framework means is that there's room to disagree, right? So we're not telling people who to vote for or where to stand on every single issue, because the Bible doesn't speak to necessarily directly to every issue. So we would be wrong to pretend that it does. But we do provide a framework which creates boundaries for what we can do and what we can do. I do think there are some very clear boundaries on where we can stand when it comes to abortion, where we can stand when it comes to sexual ethics and things of that nature. So we're trying to provide that. And I think really what it hinges on is this false dichotomy. Again, this idea in our political landscape, this false idea that you need to separate social justice from moral order, right? That if you care about social justice, you're going to be on the left. If you care about moral order or biblical values, then you're going to be on the right. But if you look at the gospel, if you look at the walk of Jesus, he had the justice and biblical values. He had the compassion and the conviction, and he didn't separate love and truth in the ways that we do today. And so Compassion and Conviction, our book, really dives into that. And that's the core of what we're trying to do. We talk about race and politics. We talk about civility, what it means, what it doesn't mean. how some folks do use civility as a weapon, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a value in it. And I think it's one of those books that just works on different levels. It works for people who don't really understand politics but want to understand it, but also those who've been in it or been engaging in politics but want to be able to do it in a better way, because now they see that the parties aren't really the ones that are supposed to be leading them. And so I think it'll be helpful and great for Bible studies. I mean, if you have folks at church that are struggling with this, it's, every chapter at the end of the book is going to have questions and exercises that you can go over with friends, family, and church members. And so I think it'll really be helpful in that regard. Got you.
Now, I'm not trying to get you in any trouble. You know what I'm saying? So feel free to not answer this question if you don't want to. But, you mentioned something about, you've hit on a couple of buzzwords already. I'm saying you say things like justice. I'll just use that for example. And I'm now on my show. I know it's your first time here, and but I keep it all the way 100. You know what I'm saying? I know for a fact that by you using the word justice, that there are going to be some people who watch this video, some people who engage with you, who will automatically take what you said about justice and basically insert the word social in front of it. You know what I'm saying? Call you a social justice warrior and equate that to being like a leftist and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? It's like being explicit, being a black man, being a black woman. It's like you can't speak on certain things. You know what I'm saying? No matter how, regardless of the fact that you talked about going to scripture first, regardless of the fact that you talked about how your book is filled with, scripture and tying everything back into that, you know what I'm saying? You're going to have that contingent of people who are going to hear you and not hear you, right? So my question is, like, how do you navigate that? How do we navigate that, right? To some extent, would you say that, I guess it's kind of our duty to just, do as best we can, explain what we mean and then keep it moving? Or, how do we tackle that, in terms of, basically when people seem to be intent upon misinterpreting where it is that you're coming from? Like, how, somebody in your position, how do you navigate that?
I always point to the Bible. I mean, I don't know how those folks go through the Bible, go through Isaiah, go through Amos, go through Micah, and not understand that the biblical justice has a social and racial application. Right. To me, biblical illiteracy. So I don't really get so up in arms about it. I mean, I'll have the conversation. I think that's part of discipleship. It would be right on my part to say, man, I'm just not talking to y'all no more. Blah. I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time running around in circles, because there's people who aren't hardened of heart and have ears to hear on that, on that subject. Right. Clearly, let's take it to the Bible. And it's unfortunate that folks that claim to be orthodox are almost illiterate when it comes to how justice is part of the Bible. And over again, God tells us that he has an expectation that we'll do justice. That doesn't mean that our works justify us, but it certainly means that they're indicative of what's written on our hearts and that there's an expectation for us to do that. So what I'd say to those folks is that you need to look at why you're so afraid of justice in a social context. What are you trying to protect? Are you trying to protect, some of your advantages and privileges? There's something there that you're trying to protect, but it certainly isn't justified by the Bible. Whatever you're getting at certainly isn't founded in the gospel. And so that's their problem more than mine. I'm willing to have that conversation, that debate, but the Bible is clear. But one of the things that I also do is I think anytime you have a conversation, you need to affirm what can be affirmed, because that's the only way to come around with somebody. And so I will also readily admit, because I'm not trying to protect that there are distorted conceptions of justice that are out there, and that they are very dangerous. And we can have that conversation about what they are, right? Let's get into that. But at the same time, just because there are distorted conceptions of justice doesn't mean that I shouldn't do justice. The best thing to do is not to run away from justice. It's to provide a more accurate example. That's the way that you approach that. And so those are the conversations I have. I don't really, it doesn't do too much to me, because if we walk through the gospel, we can very easily show you where there's that social and racial application when it comes to justice. And when you got the Bible on your side, brother, we shouldn't be too worried about what other folks have to say.
I agree, man. I mean, and I think one of the things that kind of pains me is I think that what's happened is people on the left have, actually, no, I'll say this, people on the left and the right, I'm talking about politically speaking, have hijacked certain biblical language, right? And so like justice, for example, I'll even go as far as to say the term, the phrase social justice And because when you look scripturally, you really can't walk out justice, you know what I'm saying, like in its fullest form without doing so within the social context, right? You know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to live justly without that element of you're living justly towards others in the mix of a social context. So, you know, I really think that this notion of social justice gets hijacked by the left, vilified by the right, and then it becomes like untouchable, you know, in a sense for Christians who are really trying to live out the biblical ethic. But as truth seekers, I'm saying as people who are interested in truth, we shouldn't let that be the case. It'd be like somebody breaking into your house, you know, stealing a family heirloom, and then, you know, it's like you don't want to go get it back. I mean, obviously it's something that's of value. Like, why not go retrieve that? You know what I'm saying? And I think that's kind of where we miss it. Like for me, I don't think that we should allow the left to maintain some sort of ownership over concepts like justice or even social justice and things of that nature. I mean, you're right. You can't read through the scriptures. You can't possibly read through the scriptures, particularly the Old Testament, but even in the teachings of Jesus, you can't read through these things and not see justice plastered all throughout the biblical text. Jesus, you know, said to the Pharisees, right, you know, that you guys are neglecting the weightier matters of the law, right? Justice, mercy, faithfulness, so on and so forth. You know, so I really think that it's tragic, if you will, that so many people are just willing to lay down aspects of the biblical worldview just because somebody in the world created some sort of like secular caricature of it. Like, we really ought not do that. You know what I'm saying? Likewise, when it comes to people on the right, you know, with this notion of like, you know, what I refer to as Western individualism, but I'll say the value of the individual is also exemplified in the scripture. You know what I'm saying? But we ought not to allow, you know, those on the right to, I think, hold up what I would take to be a caricature of what scriptures refer to as the individual values, things of that nature. So it happens all across the spectrum. But I'm glad you responded to that, though. I mean, because I think you're right. Like, we ought not to spend too much time on it. But I ain't gonna lie, man. You might be a better man than me, bro. Like, because sometimes I'll post something. Like, somebody just post that one comment that gets under my skin. I feel like I have to respond. And my wife be like, "No, just do what you do, bro, and not worry about what everybody talking about." But that's good, though, man. That's good. I'm gonna follow your example. I'm gonna follow your example.
Right, man. But I think you hit a good point. I mean, silence is golden. Yeah. So sometimes that can be the best way to address it. But I'm not perfect on that either. I'm not trying to say I always get it right. But I do try to keep it in perspective, because I think, man, we got ancestors who are getting their head beat, you know, and all that stuff. I can take a comment or two here and there. But you made a good point. I'm not gonna let them boys have it. Like, just because somebody took and co-opted social justice, I'm not going to let them have that. We're the progeny of the civil rights movement. Why am I going to let you co-opt it and keep it on something that we know we can do better, right? So that's I'm not everything. I mean, the history of the world is about folks taking biblical things or things that were good and distorting them, whether it be lyric, whether it be it. You going to let them have it, or you going to show them how to really do it? And that's the AND campaign's perspective.
That's good.
When it comes to conservatives, man, I don't know that it's even a good faith thing. I think, look, you're trying to protect something, and it's not the gospel, right? Mm-hmm. It's something that has nothing to do with the gospel, why you don't really want to get into the justice conversation. And we should just make it a very clearly not a gospel. It's not really even a gospel conversation. This is about something else to you. And so we can talk about it, but we can't go to the Bible because you don't want to go there with me.
Well, I mean, and that's keeping it all the way. I mean, and I'll go further than that, just to be more explicit. Like, I think, like, so my channel, you know, Tru-ID stands for the real you, Imago Dei. People hear me say it all the time. You know, if you take a feature of who you are and make it the foundation of who you are, as opposed to coming from a biblical understanding and having your foundation be that we're made in the image of God and we're covering the children of Him. Anything else other than that foundation, the biblical foundation, if you make that your foundation, it's going to be an idol, and inevitably you're going to be off track in terms of how you understand yourself and how you engage with other people. Now, here's the thing. For my brothers and sisters, and I'm explicitly not limiting this just to white brothers and sisters. I want people to be clear about this. For those who see an intersection between their self-concept and, you know, their national heritage, okay, United States of America. They see the United States of America in a particular way, and hold it to a particular level of esteem. And to some extent, there's this intersection between how they see themselves and what they believe about America. What happens is when somebody like me comes along and says, you know what, actually, all nations are fallen because all people are fallen. And even though this is what you were taught in your history books, what the historical record actually shows is A, B, and C. Here's where America has diverged from the biblical ethic. This is what we need. This is where we need to be calling people back to the biblical ethic. See, when I come along and say things like that, they feel like, okay, well, if you're talking about America, then you're really talking about me. You know what I'm saying? It's because we have this unhealthy relationship, some of us, an unhealthy relationship between ourselves and our self-concept and how we conceptualize America. The same can be said about the Black community. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll keep it 100. Like, there's a reason why when I deal with people in the conscious community, where rather than dealing with slavery that's going on in the African continent today, they want to, or, during, in the 1600s or whatever, they want to divert attention away from that. But, it wasn't that bad, and so on and so forth. The reason why is because you have an unhealthy relationship between your self-concept and your racial identity. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm as Black can be. You know what I'm saying? I love my heritage. I'm all about it. But it's always going to come secondary to that foundation that was laid in scripture, in that before there was an America, before there was a Black, white, whatever, there were people who were made in the image of God. I'm saying over and above America, race, or whatever, there's the cross. You know what I'm saying? So covenantally, I'm God's child. Foundationally, I'm made in the image of God. That's going to be my starting point. And everything after that, it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? But if you don't get those things right, if you're interested in protecting this pristine image, you know what I'm saying, or nearly pristine image of America, because you feel like it's somehow tied to you, in a way that I'm saying is unhealthy, then it's going to be hard for us to have real conversations about how we are to live out the biblical ethic in the world, because that's going to be a stumbling block for you. Does that make sense? You see where I'm coming from? Or?
Well, it makes absolute sense. I think even in politics, what you tie your identity to is so important. And that's why these parties and ideological tribes try so hard to get you to tie your identity to them, right? Because once your identity is tied to them, you're going to fight for them like you're fighting for yourself when you're really not fighting for yourself.
Right. It's true.
That's what identity should be tied to.
Right.
And I think it goes back. I mean, even within the Black community, and every community, anything nowadays that goes against a cultural narrative, right? Because we all want our cultures to look pristine, perfect, which we know they're not. Like, we can talk about the culture, but we only talk about part of the culture when we always talk about the culture, right? We don't talk about the culture. And so anything that goes against our cultural narrative doesn't exist. Like, if you notice, like, hey, no, that goes against, that makes us look bad, it doesn't exist, or it's, but it's like, no, we have stuff we can do better too. And it doesn't help us to deny that. It doesn't help me to say, nah, this problem within my community doesn't exist, just to make me look good, make me look perfect to others. Number one, nobody believes you. The only people that believe you are folks that are already indoctrinated.
Right.
The message that it sends to the community is all our stuff is external. But if everything you have is out of reach and not within part of your accountability, then you don't have any agency. Right? We never want to rob our people of agency. We never want to say that everything that's happening to you has nothing to do with you. Even during the worst of times for Black America, the Black church always taught that we have agency. And that's one of the things that I warn the folks who are just running with all these secular progressive narratives. They're happy to tell you that you're not in control. Hey, wait for us. We'll take care of you. We have agency. The decisions I make matter. Even if there is a lot of external things that are holding me down or that are keeping me back, I still make decisions and I still have a say in what happens to me. Man,
that's deep.
You're giving up too much when you give up your agency, man. You're giving up your dignity and everything else. And just because somebody smiles in your face and calls themselves your ally doesn't mean that they're robbing you of something that God gave you and that you should never let anybody have. And that's what we miss when we get into these identity conversations where we're trying to make ourselves look perfect and that every problem we have is on somebody else.
Now, see, this is interesting right here because you made a connection between something that I hadn't really thought of it in those terms. So you made a connection between, let's say, accountability, as in like, responsibility for oneself. You know what I'm saying? So accountability and agency. Now, I think that's pretty fascinating. I think you're absolutely right about that because so let's just keep it a buck. I think what's happening is, and I'm talking about specifically with the Black community, right? Between the Black community and the white community, dominant culture. I think what we have is like there's this hot potato of blame. You know okay, where people in the white community often want to center all the blame for where the black community is on the black community. They want to talk about culture. They want to talk about fatherlessness and, all those, a number of different things within that are kind of in-house to the black community, right?
Mm-hmm.
In rejection of that, the black community, often we see people, I think probably far too many people pushing back and like, well, no, it's not, it's not that. It's not these internal things that are the problem. It's, white culture has oppressed black people for the X amount of time and produced A, B, and C. Now, I think the truth probably lies in the middle. I'm saying where there's obviously these internal factors, that need to be addressed. I'm saying you can just watch BET for 5 minutes and see that there's probably some things that we need to do, within our culture. There's no doubt about that. I'm saying, and it's also the case that regardless of, put it this way, lack of fathers in the home didn't write legislation in the 1930s that secured redlining for like 3 decades. I'm saying that lack of fathers in the home didn't do that. I'm saying we're not the ones writing legislation. I got this book right here. Shoot, it's probably somewhere on my wall. The Color of Law, where it goes into much detail about not just redlining, but even not giving black people access to things like the GI Bill in the same way the whites had, or not allowing them to move into the suburbs and develop wealth in the same way the white people have. So like fatherlessness didn't do that. Nevertheless, we can agree that if you don't have the nuclear family in place, then that's obviously going to produce negative fruit within any culture, right? And so I think what's happening is because we're dealing with people in the world, they don't have a framework to properly deal with sin. You know what I'm saying? They don't, whether it be sin that's internal to the community or sin that's external to the community of an oppressive nature. In either direction, we're dealing with people who are framing these issues, like you talked about, who don't have a biblical perspective on how to deal with sin. Therefore, the way they're going to do it is do what Adam did in the garden and put some fig leaves around themselves rather than, deal with the issue that lies within themselves. You see what I'm saying? That happens on both sides of the aisle. And when you have that, if we don't have Christians, like you're talking about biblically minded Christians, stepping into the public square, then where is that balancing going to come from? I'm saying, where is that right handling of, the moral ethic, the moral reality going to come from if it doesn't come from us?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
The fact of the matter is reality is nuanced. And if you want the perfect narrative for you and your culture, anytime your narrative is perfect and it works, it makes you look great, it ain't realistic. Right? Reality is nuanced and sin exists, and we got to deal with it. And there's sin within our culture. And I would love to be able to go, to the white nationalists and say, man, we are perfect. We do nothing wrong. That would be great. But I can make a case without having to say that. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to be perfect for you to give me justice. And
right.
The point, even when it comes to the conversations about Black Lives Matter as an organization and all that, where we feel like, man, I've got to get at this white nationalist or this racist so much that I've got to make sure everything that goes against them looks perfect. And so now we got Christians who have become secular progressive apologists because they think that's what's necessary to make a case against white nationalism. No, it's not. What the case of white nationalism is number one, if you want to go to biblical doctrine, just an understanding of human dignity and justice. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to act like the dude who's pimping women in my community. Somebody forced him to do that for you to owe me justice. I don't have to do that. But we really feel like we got to have this perfect narrative, and nobody believes the perfect narrative. It's not giving you an advantage. It's actually hurting you in your community when we don't address the issues that we have internally because we think we need to act like everything. We need to find a way to explain away everything that's going on in our community that's just sin and that we need to deal with like any other community does.
But see, now I think that gets back to something you said a minute ago about dignity, right? Because I think what's happening is when you have a people group who have had their dignity undermined for like 400 years, you know what I'm saying? Like where there's been like this protracted, nearly, if not just about concerted effort on the part of at least most of the dominant culture to undermine Black dignity. It was the case that we were depicted as being stupid, not beautiful, not valuable. I mean, throughout the vast majority of our history here. And I think when you have that, then what happens is people get defensive. They're saying like, whatever you say is coming out of your mouth, if I don't like it, you know what I'm saying? It's interpreted as yet another link in the chain of abuses that are undermining my dignity. Now, but here's the thing, though, is that ultimately our dignity ought to flow from what the Bible says it should flow from. It should flow from the fact that we are made in God's image, that we are, God's covenant children, obviously for those who are Christian, but at very least, even for non-Christians, if you're made in God's image, that right there is a foundation for dignity that transcends, whatever it is anybody else has to say. You know what I'm saying? So I don't have to defend everything black. You know what I'm saying? Every time a black person does something, so I'm be halfway funny here when I say this, but there was like this episode of the Boondocks. I'm not recommending everybody watch it because I recognize it's not suitable for all audiences. But there was this episode where they had R. Kelly was going to court for doing something, and like all the black people was out there like protesting and stuff. And R. Kelly, come on, man, we know that man's been doing dirt for years now, right? You know what I'm saying, but the director was making a point that sometimes we support the wrong people. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's because at the end of the day, we feel like, okay, well, if he's one of ours and we got to protect our dignity. And to some extent, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I get that. I think there's instances where that can be good, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're centering our dignity around the right things, around biblical things, such that we don't have this maladaptive response to people that we at least perceive to be coming against our dignity. You know what I'm saying?
You don't want to let your fight to protect your dignity compromise your integrity, and I think that's what you're getting at, because you're actually defending the wrong things. Right. For me, and the reason I look at it a little differently than some people, I'm not looking to racist folks or anybody else for validation, and sometimes we get the fight for validation mixed up with the fight for justice. I'm not asking you to love me.
You got to run that back. Wait, say it again. You got to say it again. Say it again. That was tough. Say it again.
Sometimes we get the struggle for validation mixed up with the fight for justice, right? So I'm not asking anybody to think I'm beautiful and you to tell me, that you love every part of Black history. I don't care if you ever say that, because I can do that within my own community. I'm demanding justice, and that's something that's very different. But we often get them mixed up. Because again, with secular progressivism, it's so much based on self-expression and people affirming you and your self-expression that you get that mixed up with saying, no, you owe me justice, right? I'm demanding justice based on human dignity and the worth of my people. That's what I'm asking for. You can tell me, you can think that you don't like my attitude, you don't like stuff in my community. That's a whole different conversation that we can have. But right now I'm demanding justice. And those get very mixed up in our culture today, especially with some of the movements that are leading us, because they really kind of conflate those two things. And I think that's really dangerous.
And see, that's interesting because, I got a couple other questions I wanted to get to, but we keep touching on stuff that I think is pretty dope. So when I think about justice, right, I think about from a biblical perspective, the moral law is fixed. It's something that's grounded in God's essence. You know what I'm saying? So ultimately, God himself is the foundation of justice. And so that's an objective reality. So if you're building a movement off of justice, then you have this firm, fixed, objective foundation to build from. Okay. Now, validation is not really, about something objective, but it's more so subjective, because depending on who you're dealing with, they may or may not validate you. That's something that lies within the person. I'm saying I can't force somebody to validate me, right?
Or they fake validate you, right? Or they put up signs and do all this stuff that we see corporations doing when they really ain't.
They ain't worried about it, right? They're not really, exactly. So now you got deception and subjectivity. You know what I'm saying? And so now if you've got one foot on objective truth of justice, and then another foot on deception and subjective pursuit of validation, then you're inevitably going to have a movement that is unstable. You know what I'm saying? Because you have at least one foot on something that's totally subjective, as opposed to really just putting both feet rooted on the objective reality of justice. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's so powerful. You're right. I do think that we often conflate that, and in doing so, undermine whatever pursuit of justice that it is that we're going after, But I got a couple more questions I want to ask you, and then I know we want to get to the chat in a second, man. So, if y'all loving this, man, please, what I'm saying, definitely hit that like button, hit that share button. We going in right now. My man Justin is dropping jewels. So, just give us like maybe 2 or 3 points from the book that you really, are hoping to kind of come across, to the reader, just to kind of give people a snippet of what it is that y'all are bringing to the table?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we want to say is do not allow your political affiliation to become religious in nature, right? Your ideological tribe or your party should not be the master of your social action. As a Christian, as somebody who believes in the Bible, you have a unique public witness, and that's what needs to shine through. If you allow your public witness to be outsourced to these folks who got us into this situation, right? Why would I outsource my public witness to a progressive or conservative when they've clearly shown they don't have the answers? But we continually do that because we hate the other side so much. And so what I'm saying is not don't hold the other side accountable, but don't let them control you to the extent that you go from one error into another error. And so what we're saying is that, Christian, you have something better than both sides. Use the party or whatever you have to use as a tool to do God's work, but you got to hold a completely different mission. And so try not to get caught up in that fray as much. And then something, one of my favorite chapters is a chapter on messaging and rhetoric. And I think it's so important that we look at how messaging impacts us and what we think of ourselves and what we think of the issues. This goes all the way back to Genesis and the messaging that we heard from the serpent, right? There was messaging that led us astray. And so we know that words are very powerful. We really have to look at how they're used, because a lot of what's going on today is, for instance, we have the whole conversation, being biblical is whiteness, caring about the nuclear family is whiteness. What is that messaging doing? It's okay, demonize whiteness. I understand where that came from historically, but it's using that to say, well, anything I associate with whiteness now, because you dislike whiteness so much, you're going to go the opposite direction. If we're that gullible, we're in trouble. We've got to be able to see through that message to say, that has nothing to do with whether I like whiteness or not. That has nothing to do with whiteness. So you're not going to trick me, right? You're not going to run game on me. Right. Find something that is good, that my community needs, tie it to something I don't like, and then I'm just gonna go along with you because you message it that way. That's a fact. And that's one of my favorite chapters in the book, man. I think folks will enjoy it.
Well, and I think that's so crucial now as we're kind of, I was going to say moving into, but we're already in this political season, moving towards, the election. And there was something I want to say maybe it was the African History Museum or something, like African American History Museum, where they released some statement, and there was like a number of things in there, where they were saying that XYZ is whiteness. And it was things just like you named, like some things that are just, common goods for everybody, was associated with whiteness. And I do think that we have to understand now, granted, if you're not tethered to the biblical worldview, then I think it's easy to get sucked into those kind of things. You know what I'm saying? It's so easy to say, okay, that's whiteness. I ain't trying to rock with it. Oh yeah, Christianity is white man's religion. I ain't trying to rock with it. We deal with that kind of stuff all the time. But the nuclear family, there's nothing like white about it. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing white about being on time. There's nothing white about whatever other things that they listed. I think it said something like grammar or something like that. Now, I think that what we have to do is we have to be careful, like you said, not to be suckered into those kind of things. Now, I'm going to go a slightly different direction with it. Now, from what feel free to hang back on this point if you want to, because I know what I know about your platform is that you don't go at other people like that, and that's something I respect about you. But I do want to say, just in light of my audience, be careful of the messaging that you see coming from secular Black people who market themselves to the white community as being martyred truth tellers who have been rejected by the Black community because nobody wants to hear from them because they're coons. You know what I'm saying? That's messaging too. All right. So Adam Coleman has a platform. Justin Giboney has a platform. We're very intentional about what our platform gives off in the public square because we want to attract people to what it is that we're really passionate about or what it is that we're about. All platforms that do well in the public square get good at that. Now, when it comes to platforms like Candace Owens, and I don't mind naming names, Candace Owens, Larry Elder, Jesse Lee Peterson, the conservative twins, what's his name, Officer Braxton or whatever, Tatum, Officer Tatum, those kind of people. What happens is those individuals market themselves to the white community as being the rejected truth tellers. You know what I'm saying? I'm actually not going to put Thomas Sowell in that category, because if you read his work, I honestly don't think that's what he's trying to do. So I will, so let me just be clear. I'm not saying all Black people who are conservatives fall in that category. I'm talking about these specific individuals who have built these platforms off of that mode. It's, advantageous for them to market themselves in that way. And so what I'm encouraging, particularly my white brothers and sisters, is instead of just reposting everything they say because they hit on certain high notes of conservatism that you agree with, evaluate what they're saying based upon the biblical ethic. Evaluate what they're saying based upon the biblical worldview. And rather than going out and finding somebody who's clearly not, intent upon maintaining a robust relationship with God's word and how to apply it in the public square, why not look at somebody like a Justin Giboney? Why not look at like somebody like, shout out to my man Jason Waller. I'm saying he's got some stuff coming out. Shout out to my man, just the whole AND campaign, right? I'm saying, why not look to people like that who are telling you that they're about the biblical ethic, you know what I'm saying, and evaluate it from there. And the same thing goes on both sides. I mean, just shoot. I mean, just because you get, put it this way, I'll keep it short, but just because somebody is my skin folk, don't mean that they kinfolk. You know what I mean? Just because somebody is pro-Black, we have to evaluate that too. We talked about BLM. We talked about the fact that I agree that Black Lives Matter. I'm saying, but as an organization, I can't look through their what they believe statements and find anything about Black fathers. So if you don't care about me until I'm a corpse, I have to now question you. You see what I'm saying? So all these things come into play. Now I don't know if you want to jump into that or not, but
I think a lot of people are looking for others that affirm their narrative.
Right.
So if I'm a white conservative and I want to stay the way that I am, man, if I can find a Black person to say that I'm all good and it's actually Black people's fault, everything is their fault, I'm gonna love that. These people are capitalizing off confirmation bias, and I think it is, and I don't know everybody you name, so I can't speak to everybody.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I think it's sad, that you would allow people who have the power to change something, the power to help people and to help your people, right, and to change policy and to give resources, but instead of challenging them, you want to just go along and say what they want to say because they'll give you some money to do it. I think that's sad. And one thing that nobody can say that the AND campaign doesn't challenge both sides. So if there's somebody who's conservative who wants to hear from us and wants to understand what we're talking about, they're going to be challenged. And I would be weary, and I think this is kind of what you were getting at. Be weary of people who don't challenge you, right? Who say what you wanted to hear, and you're like, oh, they said that better than I do. I feel completely comfortable in the historic racism and everything else that has come with the American church because you said what I want to say. If they don't challenge you, you should be a little skeptical of that. And I think that's what it leads into. Don't fall for the confirmation bias. Folks they're playing you, right? These folks are playing that game, and I think there's too much. It's too serious. Too many people are being hurt to games like that, and I don't have a problem with speaking out against that. I just don't know everybody that you named.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Certainly, it's pitiful the way that they go about the business, because it's a business.
Yeah, it is a business, and I think people need to understand that. You know what I mean? And I'm just trying to keep it real, because I'm just straight up. Listen, at the end of the day, I believe that the best hope for the Black community, A, eternally, is the gospel. B, right here, right now, is the biblical worldview. You know what I'm saying? It's being able to build off a foundation that is true, that's founded in truth. You know what I'm saying? So right here, right now, in terms of how we get how we thrive as a community, that's what we need. And so therefore, I reject ideas and ideologies, worldviews that do not accord with the biblical worldview, regardless of who it comes from, whether it comes from a liberal, conservative, or anybody in between. I got bars for everybody. You know what I'm saying? If we're not building from biblical axioms, then I've got an issue with you. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not trying to just single those people out just cause it does. I'm just saying that on the conservative side of the house, liberal side of the house, I'm saying we got to keep it 100. Our metric should be, what does the Bible say? And what are the principles that we can draw from the scriptures and then build from there? You know what I'm saying? I think that's what it needs to be. So now I'm going to the next one. Is here in a second. Shout out to my man Phil Fox. Thank you for the super chat. We'll get to these questions here in just a second, actually. But I'm kind of showing my cards here a little bit. But right now, a lot of people are talking about cancel culture. They're talking about this notion of, well, you said something I don't like, therefore I'm done with you and your platform is done. I'm actually planning on doing a video called confirmation culture. I'm saying where it's actually the opposite of that, is where we find somebody who scratches our confirmation bias itch, to such an extent that we're willing to be uncritical about what it is that the body of what they have to say, and then we just we hoist them up, and esteem them on the basis of that overlap in terms of what we that confirmation bias, if you will. I think that's dangerous, and that's what I'm referring to is when people hit these certain high notes of conservatism that you agree with, I'm saying, then it's like everything else that they say becomes white noise, and we're not being critical enough about the body of what they're saying to really evaluate if from A to Z it accords with the biblical worldview to such an extent that we can I like the word you used earlier, kind of be co-belligerent with them. You know what I'm saying? So another issue we've kind of talked around. I'm gonna get here in a second. So if anybody has a question for Brother Giboney, go ahead and start putting those in the chat. We will take the super chats first. But we're about to start getting to some questions in here in just a second. So go ahead and start putting those in the chat so we'll be ready for them. If mods, can y'all help me out, getting some of those questions lined up so that I can, make sure I'm asking them in the right order. But we've kind of talked around. I think you used the term partisanship versus partnership. And we talked about how partisan politics, the left and the right, Democrat, Republican, kind of is like Montagues and Capulets. Basically, we can get into this mode of just battling one another from a party standpoint, and how that can hinder the believer. I'm just going to kind of throw this at you. This is one thing I've been saying for a while. I think part of the problem, and I think there's problems on both sides. I think there's people on the liberal side of the house that hear certain things that actually do accord with the biblical world ethic. I mean, in the sense that I do think that the Bible, being as Eastern of a book as it is far more collectivist than we understand when we read it through Western eyes. I think that's probably true. And I think that many times things on the left, initiatives that are pushed on the left kind of touch on that, and it resonates with people. I'm saying they seem to be about people, right? And so I understand why, I think you have some Christians who go that direction. And then the other direction, I think you have conservatives, Christians who assume that conservatism is like the political extension of the church or something like that. You know what I'm saying? There's this presupposition that America is fundamentally Christian and that conservatism really represents that. And I think part of the problem is as I've been studying it, I'm not done with my research yet, but as I've been studying it, conservatism by definition, it's really how it sounds. It's about kind of trying to conserve and protect and hold on to the ideals and principles that this nation was founded on. And people presuppose that those ideals are Christian, but actually, historically, you have this cobbling together. When America is founded, you have this cobbling together, this piecing together of biblical concepts and ideas from the secular Enlightenment period. You know what I'm saying? And so, like Western Individual I referred to earlier. So really, you have these Christians who think that they're conserving something Christian when actually they're conserving a Christian secular Enlightenment period syncretism. You know what I'm saying? And they're not doing their due diligence to kind of tease out one from the other. What do you think about this? Does that sound crazy, or is that about right?
I think that's right. I mean, we understand common grace, right? So in a lot of these things, there are things that are biblical that can align at least, with a biblical perspective. I think that's right. I mean, I've spent my life as a Democrat because I think in many instances they do align, with some of those caring for others and all that stuff. So yeah, that's it. And I would never say that these ideologies are just completely void of anything that's redemptive. So yeah, no, I hear you on that. However, we have to be able to identify where they go astray. And that's the biggest problem. Every time we put up a post, there's either a conservative or a progressive that says, in what way is conservatism out of line with the Bible? In what way is progressivism? And I'm like, please just get the book.
Right.
So many ways they are both out of line with the Bible. And we have to understand these are things that are made by human hands. So they change, especially when we're talking about political parties. Political parties change with whoever has the money, whoever's agenda might change. That's where the party is going to go, votes and money. Right. If those things change, the party changes. So if you're basing your identity or you're so tied to these parties, you may not know where your next turn is. Right. And that's one of especially the folks who bring that to the pulpit, who are affirming all these new things. Most of these cats, even though they think they're smart, they don't even know where this agenda is going. right? They just know that it sounds nice right now. It sounds kind right now. And so that's where I need to be. But if you don't know where this is headed, if you don't know where you're leading your people into, you need to ease up a little bit. And so one of the things that on the conservative side, my question is, how are you going to deal with the fact that historically many ideological conservative Christians failed miserably when it came to civil rights? How do you deal with that, and how have you corrected that? If you ask me, they haven't corrected it, and that's the problem. This thing that I ask a lot of ideologically progressive Christians, I say this: where do you stop? Where do you draw the line when it comes to abortion, sexuality? Because by nature, progressivism is going to keep moving to the left. Are you going to keep moving to the left? Tell me where you draw the line. Most of them cannot articulate where they'll draw the line because they haven't thought about it that deeply. They just thought conservatism is bad, progressivism is good, and I'm just going to move with them. But where are they leading you, and where does it stop? Because certainly to be biblical at all is to say that there is a place where you've gone too far. If you haven't identified that place, then be very slow to promote those tenets, especially if you don't know where they're leading. So those are the two questions, one for conservatives, the other for progressives that I have, because I think you're right. There are good things that you can find in both of them, but where might they lead you astray? And before you become an apologist or such a proponent for them, you better know that, especially if you call yourself influencer. And especially in this social justice conversation, we have a lot of influencers who just have not done their homework. And so they're following at the cool kids table. And they're not going to say anything that goes against the cats who are at the cool kids table because they want to get that retweet, or they want to be included in that conversation. If that's where you're at, it is what it is, but that's not biblical, and you're leading people astray. So if you're going to hold yourself out that way, do your homework and know how things align with the Bible and where they're out of line with the Bible.
Yeah, that's good, man. I think you're right, and I'm gonna just be real. Like, I think this is something that I've really grappled with, particularly over the last couple of weeks. Is that I think that, and I'm not trying to steam myself, but individuals like you, I know that I'm trying to approach these things from a biblical standpoint. You know what I'm saying? I know that you're trying to approach these things from a biblical standpoint, and I think what's troubling is I think that we have to be honest with ourselves and recognize that we probably are more of a minority voice than we would like to be. You know what I'm saying? That, the vast majority of people approaching these issues are not approaching these things from a biblical standpoint. You know what I'm saying? And so there can be that temptation where I'll just use this example. I know that there's a variety of different ways in which people use the term woke. You know what I'm saying? And I know that term is not inherently or necessarily anti-Christian or anti-biblical. I also know that there are ways that people will use it that do cut against, what the Bible prescribes from an ethical standpoint and from an identity standpoint. And as much as I would like to, say, well, no, woke means this, you know what I'm saying? I mean, the reality is people use it in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it's problematic, and I think so for me as a communicator, I want to do my due diligence and say, okay, well, when I use this term, here's what I mean. And then, on the other side, the principle of charity comes in where you have to say, okay, well, this is where you're coming from. I'm going to engage you rather than straw man you based on what so-and-so else said, you know what I'm saying? But, these things, it's very nuanced, you know what I'm saying? And I think I said that to say that I think that even though we are contending against injustice in the public square, we're also contending against bad ideas, you know what I'm saying? Wrong-headed conceptions of what justice is and how things ought to happen, within the Black community. You know what I'm saying? We're contending against those things so that hopefully we'll rise to the top of something that honors God. You know what I mean? But it's like we've got double duty, man. You know what I'm saying? You got double duty, So I do want to get to some questions, you know what I'm saying? And I'm going to kind of scroll back up. I think my man Jermaine Long asked a question. Oops. Oh, wait. Oh, there's a super chat. Okay, thank you. So Tru-ID Apologetics. This is from @Rocket Okay, that's from my first super chat. Do you guys have a roadmap for Christians to successfully cross the divide to the LGBTQ movement of BLM? Is there any at all? I'm not 100% sure I really understand the question.
I think I get what she's saying.
Okay, yeah, go for it. All right.
I think she's getting at the LGBTQ kind of portion of the Black Lives organization, right? And kind of the promotion of that. And I think the book will be helpful for that, because again, we talk about partnerships and really how to maneuver through partnerships. But I'll say this right now: I think you got to start off by affirming what you can affirm, that Black lives do matter, that this justice movement is very important, and we need to make some change in our society. I don't think we should have a problem saying that. And I give Black Lives Matter, the creators, I give them props for bringing to the forefront an issue that the church didn't bring to the forefront, recently in the same way, right? So if we had been doing that, they wouldn't have had to do it in this way. And there are some things that I disagree with, and I don't feel like I need to hold my tongue on that, But I think generally with the LGBTQ conversation, we do need to address that with compassion. Because for better or worse, again, not trying to keep a perfect narrative, the Black church has not always addressed that properly. So for us just to come at somebody who addresses it differently or affirms it without addressing how we have come at it in the wrong way, with not showing compassion towards people or acting like they're worse than everybody else who's doing what they want to do, is problematic. And so until we address it in that way, and until, in my opinion, we say that there's certain instances they should not be discriminated against in housing, or if you just want to get a job at FedEx, why should it matter that you're LGBTQ? Should you not be able to not be able to work? Should you not be able to feed yourself and not be able to, have housing? I don't think as a Christian that we can justify that, not based on the Bible. Now, somebody can prove me wrong, but it's about drawing the line. It's about saying, I affirm the dignity of everybody. I do not affirm everybody's behavior, even sometimes my own, right? And it's about drawing that line and walking into that type of partnership, or as co-belligerents, with being very clear on what you do not agree with and what you're not promoting, right? And I think that's part of really wading through that, to say this race thing, we have some things where we align, and let's work on that. But also, where we don't align, I'll be very clear, I'm not supporting you on that. And that's really what the public square is about. That's what everybody else is doing, right? Everybody else is drawing these lines. I mean, you look at the Jewish community, you look at the Hispanic community, they don't have a problem saying, hey, we're with you on this, we're not with you on that. We feel, sometimes we go about it like we all in or we all out. And that's not how you do politics well. So I think you just have to be nuanced and set very clear guidelines on what's agreed and what is outside of our overlap. Got you. All right, let me get, okay. We got a couple questions that have come in. So before we get there, you hit on something that I definitely want to give voice to, or actually would have you give voice to, along the lines of what you were saying. I think I may be titling it wrong, but I think it's the Fair Treatment Act is something that you guys are, what's that? Fairness for All Act. Fairness for All Act, excuse me. Like, would you kind of just give a snippet version of that? Because I think I heard about it the other day, and I definitely think that's something that people ought to get behind. Yeah, so it comes from the Utah Compromise. A lot of people, when you talk about religious liberty and LGBTQ rights, it's just like, hey, those cannot go together. And so some's got to, either one wins everything or one loses everything, right? It's a zero-sum conversation. Well, that's not what happened in Utah. In Utah, the Mormon community, who doesn't affirm LGBT, the LGBTQ lifestyle, and the LGBTQ community came together and came up with a compromise to say that, no, you know what, we can actually give religious liberty and have some LGBTQ basic civil rights covered. And so when it comes to things like housing, when it comes to things like jobs and job discrimination, it's saying, no, you shouldn't be discriminated against because of how you identify based on those issues. I don't think that's so hard. I don't think that's so hard to say. That doesn't mean that we're going to force religious organizations to affirm or to say, okay, I have to hire you as my college president, even though you couldn't even sign our statement of faith. That doesn't make sense, right? That's just like a Muslim university having to hire me as their president when I don't believe what they believe. They shouldn't have to. Right. That's not really a type of discrimination that is illegal, right? That's not that's just discerning to say we have a mission and we need our leadership to be a part of that mission. We need people in our organization to be part of that mission. So that's what the Fairness for All Act does. I think folks who are a little to the right of us say we can't compromise. It's kind of a fear that if you give anything, then they're going to take too much, or that it's going to intrude on us. And I just look at it differently. Look, I'm going to err on the side of being compassionate. I'm going to err on the side of saying, I'm not here to hold you down. I'm not here to do any of that. And where I can help you and defend you, I absolutely will, even if it is against my self-interest. I think that's the Christian standpoint. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to affirm something that biblically I can't affirm. And that's really what the Fairness for All Act is for me and how the AND campaign sees it.
Excellent, excellent. So then we got a little bit of time here for just a few more questions. I definitely want to take up your whole morning. I'm sure you got legal cases to get to and all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? But so a question from a man, Jermango Long. What up, Jermango? What's happening with you, bro? Thanks for the question. Is why do we want to separate church from state when state inherently affects the church? So that might be an opportunity to define what separation of church and state is. I'll let you take that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So the separation of church and state is just it's a concept of American government, right? It's not named explicitly in the Constitution, but there is a separation of church and state, meaning that the state or the government cannot set up a church. So they can't come and say the Pentecostal church is the church of the United States, right? That's one part of the separation, but they also can't keep you from carrying out your religion, right? They can't keep you from worshiping and believing what you believe. So you do want somewhat of a separation, because you don't want them to come and say, hey, we want Mormonism to be the official church of America. Well, then you're like, then they're violating you. So there's a good aspect of that, but that separation isn't what some people think it is. Some people take it to mean that you should not bring your Christian values into the conversation, or your Muslim values into the conversation about policy. And that's not what the separation of church means. It just means that the state cannot establish one religion or one church as representing everybody. And they also can't infringe on your religious liberty. That's what it means.
Gotcha. Excellent. Yeah, I think a lot of people misunderstand that. I mean, I didn't even know that it wasn't that phrase separation of church and state wasn't in the Constitution until maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. I just assumed that it was, but you're right. It's referring to the outline, those rights and whatnot. Now I think this question is for me, because I remember I said something about worldviews and ideology. You said name a worldview that isn't an ideology. Maybe the person's just being funny, but I guess just to clarify what I meant, I think all worldviews are ideologies, but not all ideologies are worldviews, in the sense of what I was talking about at the time. So for example, worldview, I'm referring to a framework that answers like life's biggest questions. I'm talking about like the big picture. Whereas an ideology might be a subset of that. It might be, something like you might have a capitalistic ideology, right? You know what I'm saying? Your ideology with respect to economics is capitalistic in nature, or communist in nature, or socialist, or whatever. You might have an ideology about economics, but yet and still, the ultimate big questions of your worldview might be biblical or something like that. You might have a biblical worldview as in the big picture, and in these subsets of other areas, some specific area, you might have a particular ideology. So just to kind of let you know, that's kind of what I had in mind when I said that there. Maybe, I guess, for anything, at least I was able to kind of clarify that. I think this would probably be, I saw one more question, or at least I thought I did. You know what I'm saying? But or maybe not. If I missed a question, just throw it in the chat. But while we're doing that, we're actually going to get ready to close out here in just a second. But I definitely wanted to give people an opportunity, or give you an opportunity rather, to let people know how they can get the book, man. How they can get the book, how they can reach out to you, get with the AND campaign, get down with that, and so on, man. So take it away.
And so as far as getting the book, again, the book is Compassion and Conviction. It's the AND campaign's framework for faithful civic engagement. You can get that at IV Press, who is our publisher. So you can go to their website, or you can go to Amazon and get the book, man. We would greatly appreciate it. Again, I think it works on different levels. It's going to be a great resource for pastors. It's going to be a great resource for folks in the pew who want to use it as a kind of a Bible, something, for Bible study. Because as we go into these 2020 elections, we want to make sure that the body of Christ comes out better than it did in 2016. And I think this book can be helpful in that. If you want to engage the AND campaign, start a chapter, just start to understand what we're about, you can contact us at engage@andcampaign.org, engage@andcampaign.org. Or you can just follow us on social media, and that's at AND campaign, at AND campaign, man. And thanks for having us on, Adam. We appreciate it. Of what you do, man. Please keep putting that good theology out there, because folks need it, man.
Yeah, trying to do it, man. I appreciate you, bro. I mean, and actually, truth be told, so we first met. The only time we met in person was at Isaiah Robinson's church. Shout out to Isaiah Robinson. His book is coming out next week as well. Black Church Empowered. And, I think we met at the Truth Summit, this past year. And it's funny, I was telling my wife, now people know, I come out of the Word of Faith movement, you know what I'm saying? Growing up, I mean, I was in all them James, man, Kenneth Copeland, Creflo, and so on and so forth. I was, tripping theologically, you know what I'm saying? Thank God that he took me out of that. But from that, I basically kind of developed this mode where I'm very, not skeptical, but I listen very critically when I hear people speak on things. You know what I'm saying? I really try to weigh out, or do my due diligence in a way to weigh out what people have to say. And it's very rare that I'll sit through something and agree with everything that somebody had to say. And it was odd for me when I was listening to you speak at the Truth Summit. There wasn't one thing that you said that I disagree with. You know what I'm saying? I think you spoke for like an hour and a half. And that's very rare for me. I came back and told my wife, I was like, yo, this dude is on point. Like, I mean, I already knew about the AND campaign. I already knew about, the work you were doing. But hearing you lay out from A to Z what the AND campaign was about is very inspiring, because I'm like, okay, this dude is attacking these issues from a biblical vantage point. It's balanced, and he's not compromising the scriptures. So that's why I've had to, I've just been wanting to get you on the show, man. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate what you bring to the table. Man, I tell you what, this is tough because it gets some more questions coming in. We're probably gonna have to have you come back. I know you got to go, so but we got to have you coming back because we get some interesting questions coming in. But anyway, I have the book. Actually, it's in the description of this video, so people can click on the Amazon link and get that right there. You know what I'm saying? And I just want to say once again, man, I appreciate you guys. For everybody who stopped in on the chat, we had a dope crew in here with the mods. Thank y'all and everything. And go check out the AND campaign. Buy the book today. Let's not just give lip service to it. Get out there, buy the book, rock with the AND campaign. Stay tuned with them as long as things are moving towards the election as well. They're constantly, giving their perspectives. I don't know how you do it, man. You be on Twitter like a beast, yo. I'm saying, like, you be tweeting like I'm the laziest tweeter of all time, man. I'm saying, but you stay dropping gems on Twitter, man. So if y'all are following them on Twitter, make sure you do that as well, man. So with that being said, love y'all, man. Y'all know what it is. Love God, love people, take care of the things that God blesses you with. And if you know better, you can grow better. That's what it is. Peace.